over the coming months. They may be the ones who decide the election after all. It's happened before. Here's Chris.
Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. We're heading into a very important tradition weekend. In fact, I'm taking tomorrow night off, and I'm taking Monday night off. Why? Because tradition matters. Tradition matters. And Memorial Day matters. Just for everybody at home, remember, there's a difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, right? Memorial Day are those who gave their lives in service to this country. Veterans Day is for everybody who's served, whether they died or not in service. The sacrifice is still profound. And I think it's really important this year that we try to get back into our traditions. We try to get back into our collective concerns. Now, you may say, what's this guy talking about? What do you mean get back? I've always been in there. My community, good. Because there is an increasing disconnect online and in reality. Because I don't believe that social media is reality. I believe that it's magnified minority voices, that the media, including me too often, we give it outsized relevance. And as a result, it has grown into our party structure. Fringe has dominated the two parties. We see it all the time. It's my lead story tonight about how it's affected the state of play. So I say the reaction formation to that is, let's get back to what makes us Americans. And those are shared traditions and a fundamental national religion of freedom through law. That's our national religion, the Constitution, and the laws made thereunder. And our government is supposed to be a proxy for the clergy. Now, I'm not saying they're holy, right? I'm just saying, just as with the rest of Christianity, anybody who knows their teachings, what is really the church? The people. What is really the country? The people. Memorial Day matters, not just because of the poppies, not just because of the flags, not the pomp and circumstance, not just the barbecues, but all of it. Remember the sacrifice. Remember that being American matters, and it is absolutely a source of pride. You have every right to not like your country, but that doesn't make not liking your country right. There's nothing wrong with loving your country. We have very good reason to love America, least of which to you, maybe most of which to me, is that we're just getting started. We're young, and we are figuring it out, and we are fighting the fights, and some of them make sense, and some of them don't make sense. But enjoy this weekend. Get together with friends. Be with your family. Feel good about yourself. Feel good about the potential that we can have together. All right? Now, you got to reinforce it because it's so easy to get down because of the nature of politics and media and what we're shoving in your face all the time. We try to do it differently here at NewsNation, specifically on my show, at least, but there's still a lot of stuff to deal with, and that's important, too. So here's something unique heading into a Memorial Day weekend. We've never seen this before. Donald Trump, right now, is up the street from our studio in the Boogie Down Bronx. I'm laughing because the idea of Trump in the Bronx is like anathema. When the guy lived in New York City, he never went to the Bronx. And now he's holding a rally in an attempt to win over black and Hispanic voters. And I got to tell you, that's not a joke. Now, it's interesting to see, does he believe he can really connect with these populations by saying, I know what it's like now to deal with a two-tiered justice system. You people were right. Is he going to remind them that he's never seen a police use of force that he was bothered by? Can he really sell them that he was better for them as president? Here's some of what he said.
African Americans are getting slaughtered. Hispanic Americans are getting slaughtered. And these millions and millions of people that are coming into our country, the biggest impact and the biggest negative impact is against our black population and our Hispanic population, who are losing their jobs, losing their housing, losing everything they can lose. They're the ones that are affected most by what's happening.
Now, what's interesting is he's saying they, but he's talking to them. He should have been saying you. Now, what is that? That's just, him reading a speech or not really connecting with that population because they're not his people. They should be. but they're not. Is he telling them the truth? No. Migrants are not taking your jobs, okay? They are filling jobs that you aren't taking. In fact, migrants and immigration are a big slice of the economic growth and recovery since the pandemic. Now, look, we got to learn to hold two thoughts in our heads at the same time, okay? What I just said is true, and our immigration system is, fill in the ugly word, it's broken. It's a mess. Our southern border is a mess, and Biden owns it, okay? So two things can be true at once. We struggle with that. Why? Because all people want to hear is what's good for their side and demonizes the other. You got to be a critical thinker. You got to be independent. And also, I may be mocking Trump being in the Bronx, and with good reason, but I'm not comparing Trump to some standard of perfection. I'm comparing him to the alternative. Biden is slipping in recent polls with the same populations that are in the Bronx. Trump's support among black voters has doubled from the same time last year. Is that a misleading notion? Yeah, kind of. I didn't write that. And he's going to probably top out at somewhere between 15 and 20% with minority voters. So doubled is dramatic, but he's only getting 20%. Why? Because he doesn't really care about those people in terms of his policies, and that's true. What are you talking about? It was the best for them during the economy when he was president. That's not really true, and they certainly didn't feel that at the time. But in a tight race, if those voters are in the right places, not New York City, and it shifts even that slightly, it could matter. Now, before my Democrat brothers and sisters roll their eyes, please focus them on the screen, because I'm not just pulling this out of my pie hole. President Biden agrees with me. You know how I know? He spent big money on an ad to win back this population right now.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies. Now, who do you think that is?
Of course I hate these people.
Now, my guess is, if you dig into the context, that will not seem that fair. But welcome to the state of play. It's all about demonizing the other side. Why? Because in a two-party system, that's the only place you can go. It's naturally zero-sum. Nobody's going to waste their time convincing you that they have a better idea or they can make something happen. We've already collectively endorsed the idea that opposition is a legitimate position. You don't have to do anything when you go to Congress. You can just promise you'll stop the other people. So let's discuss some of the hot-button issues with better minds. NewsNation contributor Lindsey Granger, Arizona conservative talk show host Mike Broomhead, and former Trump White House communications director and author of the new book, From Wall Street to the White House and Back, Mr. Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony, while I have you, each and all, thank you very much, and I wish you the best for the coming Memorial Day weekend. Anthony, tell us, why do we need this book right now?
Well, I mean, listen, I got blasted out of the White House and skinned alive, Chris, and then I got rolled in margarita salt. But that wasn't enough. I made a large investment in crypto and ended up involved in the Sam Bankman-Fried issue. So it was a double whammy for me. I put down in a book what you need to do to pull yourself out of a situation like that. And I appreciate you being there for me, Chris, and endorsing the back of the book. Because you and I have great careers, but we've also had trials and tribulations in our careers. And it was really a message to my kids in never giving up and trying to do the best you can to keep your integrity. Because I believe if you have your integrity, there'll always be opportunity for you.
Well, the reason people show up for you, Anthony, is because you're a good friend. Lindsey Granger, do you believe that Trump's play in the Bronx... Now, I did not mention that some people say it's just a distraction from the trial. I don't buy that. I think the Trump campaign believes that that population is in play, maybe not in New York City, but in pockets across the country. What's your take?
Well, I'll go with your saying, Chris. Both things can be true. So he definitely needs to distract away from this trial because all the negative press he's getting is not helping, even with the same campaign speech that he has in the courtroom, that he's the victim. So if that is a tactic, it's a good one. You have to commend the man for going to the bluest state in the bluest part of it and trying to say from his team that they get to every corner of the country. That's a quote, that they're unafraid to kind of answer these tough questions. And he went there and he feels like this population's up for grabs. Now, I don't think that New York has voted a federal Republican overwhelmingly since Reagan in 1984. So his chances are probably very low. But we did see a local city council seat get flipped to Republican just last year. And so I think that he's understanding that this group of people feels ignored and demoralized by the fact that there's been such a consistent and overwhelming support for Democrats and barely anything in return when they look at things like the way that New York has responded to migration, but also at the same time that budget has to come from somewhere. And a lot of times it's being cut from programs that are being directly affected or affecting people of color. And so that's a real conversation to have. Even if they're not taking jobs, like you said earlier, it's still a conversation about being neglected and not being given the same support and care that some other groups are when they are the most loyal voting bloc for Democrats.
Smart. I agree. Mike, let me bring you in here. First of all, will you tell people that Broomhead is not my nickname for you? I got all these emails the last time you were on that I shouldn't be calling you that. Yeah. And you could probably smack me around. I was like, first of all, he could smack me around, and that's really his name. Mike, what's your take on the move in the polls from 9 to 22%? Just a snapshot of a moment in time, but what do you think's moving the needle?
I think a lot of what's moving the needle is commonality. When you look at just on the immigration issue, if you remember the big controversy about the busing when the Arizona governor, Doug Ducey, and Governor Abbott in Texas began busing people to cities that are classically liberal cities across the country, once they began to deal with some of the same issues, a lot of the politics went away. There was commonality in issues. And so I think possibly it's not red and blue. Maybe there's a lot of these independent voters are moving more to the center because they're seeing we're not that far apart on a lot of issues. And so I think for Trump, instead of going red, 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 he thinks he needs to go back to the other side a little bit, and maybe he can gain some ground in the middle.
Look, you and I share that. Actually, go ahead, Lindsay.
I would say this is not a local issue just for the Bronx. I think it's a bigger federal issue. Almost 80% of Black people vote Democratic in every single election. And I think that that's it's remiss of the party to do things like what Biden did when he was on the campaign trail last time and go to Charlemagne the God's The Breakfast Club show and say, you ain't Black if you don't vote for me. I think people are exhausted. And so this voting block is actually up for grabs because they feel like no one cares and they're not being heard. And I think that's a valid take. These polls are not real. I mean, they are real. No matter how much people try to dismiss them, they're real numbers. And if real people have voter apathy, then guess what? Yeah. This election is going to be won by who sits on the couch.
I think the constituency is focused by exigencies, and that's a lot of word salad to say these populations, as you go down the socioeconomic ladder, inflation hits harder and harder. And they're feeling the bite, these populations. I hear it all the time. And that resonates because Biden is in office. You know, I was smiling, Lindsay, because it's so interesting to me. Biden says what he says. You're not Black if you don't vote for me. Stupid thing to say. He gets crushed by the right. Trump says, you're not really Jewish. You don't love Israel if you don't vote for me. It barely gets an eyebrow raised from anybody on the right. The outrage is so selective. It's just so frustrating to me. I hate the parties. Anthony, Ashley Biden, her diary is real. She left it somewhere. Someone got it. Someone put it out. She has not yet said whether what she wrote in it is real and reflective of her truth right now. Does that matter? Does this issue matter?
I think it's Ashley's decision to make that an issue or not an issue. And I think the problem is I'm sure she doesn't want to bring it up and she wants to see her dad get reelected. And so, you know, this is a family matter. And so I'm going to say that it's not an issue. And I'm going to also say, to be fair to Donald Trump, there's picadillos that the left enrages about Donald Trump that are probably also not issues. So I think you have a canceling equation on both sides, and we should let these two candidates who are going to be obviously our nominees, Chris, litigate the core meta issues before us, and then we have to make a decision that way. But unless Ashley herself brings this up, I don't think this will become a major issue in this campaign.
But I think, Anthony,
Mike,
as a journalist,
go ahead,
we know
Lindsay.
that this was brought up, and she said it's grossly misinterpreted. That's a quote from her. And she said she's uncomfortable with this diary being released. But when some of the documentation is about a child, and as a woman who had a diary that's now in the same age range as Ashley, when you're documenting some of those experiences as a child that made you feel unsafe around your family, and it is already in the public eye, and then you have outlets like the New York Times that are just ignoring that piece of what was in the actual diary, no matter how it was retrieved, the information is still here. And so people want to understand, were you feeling protected? Because a lot of the voters out there are moms, are dads that look to their president to be similar to them in those ways. And so they kind of want to understand it. And now that it's public information, to not say anything will kind of allow voters to create full stories, full soap operas in their mind about this.
So I want to respond to that,
Lindsay,
if it's okay, because...
Go ahead.
But I mean, just quickly, I mean, President Trump has suggested he wants to date his daughter. He calls his daughter uncomfortably hot. There are almost obscene pictures of her sitting on his lap. And, I don't know. You tell me. Should we make these issues part of this campaign? Is that what you want to focus on? Or do you want to focus on what's going on in the country and the potentiality that you got one guy talking about a unified Reich, and you got him with Steve Bannon on the telly telling people that they're going to come after people that are their adversaries, using the government to come after them. So we can talk about all these issues if you want. They're going to be litigated in November, and Trump's going to lose the election. So, and he's not going to get any votes in the Bronx of any significance.
I don't know, Anthony. He's not going to do great in the Bronx. That's true. But I don't know. Here's what I think.
Chris,
and Mike, I want to come to you on this. We can
have a gentleman's bet on this, okay? But he's going to lose the election.
That's fine.
Okay?
That's
fine.
You got all that money.
You got to
bet.
pretend that he's not going to lose the election.
I'll take odds.
He's going to lose the election.
No. First of all, hold on a second. I'm not voting for Trump. I say voters should be open. I think he's disqualified himself by being just below the standard. Now, you can say, well, so is Biden. I think these are the two worst choices we've ever had, and they are a wake-up call for Americans to leave the parties. But, Mike, let's be honest about the media. All due respect to Lindsay, who's a legit journalist. We love this stuff. It's so much easier and better to cover than it is the real issues. Sexual peccadillos, pederasty. We love it. We'll dive into it twice as deep, twice as fast as any kind of policy discussion. The question is, what does it do with the voters, Mike? Not the pockets on social media who are desperate to hate the other side, but folks like you and your listeners.
Yeah, but I think this is where you and I are different from some of the other people in the media business, is that I'm not interested in when this happens. I think it takes away from the real issues. I'm in a border state. That's a big issue. Inflation remains sticky high. People are concerned about deficit spending. And there is a conversation to be had about that. It's uncomfortable for me to go down that road. So here's a young girl who wrote in a diary years ago. And I understand that people now want to know get some clarification, but you're asking somebody to open up their most personal thoughts in an election year that is not going to make a difference whatsoever. I'll be honest with you. I have not spent 1 minute talking about this issue on my show. Not one.
Good for you.
And
Leave the personal stuff alone.
My perspective is not that it's right or wrong to dig into these issues. Right. I definitely find that there's a hierarchy of things to discuss. Most importantly, the economy, inflation, and then everything else going on foreign soil.
We don't live by that.
However, I think it's important to examine that your father is running for the highest office in the world. And so when that happens, you are actually allowing your family to be subjected to all these disgusting attacks. And it's not in my opinion that it's the right thing to do. It just is. When people are running for president, you see the way we criticize every single one of Malia and Sasha Obama's steps, even after Obama left the office. So this is just a real life thing when it's presidents, no matter how the information is garnered, when we see some of these pictures that are
we used to leave him alone.
Diary.
We used to leave him alone.
But now we're in the age
we
of
used to
social
leave
media.
him alone. There's been an attrition. Wait, let me just touch one more thing before I let you guys go. Lindsay, I'll stay with you and then we'll just get a quick whip around on it. I don't understand why Trump is talking about limiting contraception. I don't get it. He does not need to do anything to keep the evangelicals. This is going to outrage women and their male allies that, oh, wow, he really is against reproductive rights because it's not just abortion. He wants to get rid of contraception. Why is he talking about this, Lindsay?
Your guess is as good as mine, because this is not a winning issue for Republicans. I think they should understand that from the 2020 election and how there was no red wave that everyone discussed, basically because of the repealing of Roe versus Wade. And I think that even the conversation most recently this Monday, Ted Cruz introduced legislation to protect IVF, and that's coming from the Republican side. So there's really friction on how to move forward in this. And even Trump hasn't been so firm in what he wants to do, particularly around abortion rights. And so I think that this is just something that they need to let go. This is not going to work, because there are people that I've had full conversations with that are splitting their household, that were wholly Republican, but now breaking away from their husbands and choosing to vote in their best interest as a woman. And so I think they need to take note about what's happening, because these small things are going to be the make or break factors for the election in November.
Chris, can I jump in?
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this is a chance for people like myself. I am adamantly pro-life. I am also, I would consider myself a Christian. It's an opportunity to say that it doesn't matter what the law says. If you believe that it's wrong, you have a right to tell people it's wrong and have a civil discussion of why you believe it's wrong. We have got to stop leaning on the law that because we don't think it's right, we should say it's wrong for everybody. It is a loser for Republicans. It's a loser issue for us. We're battling this in Arizona. We defaulted back to a law that dates back to 1864, and it is beating down the Republicans here. We can, and I do say, I believe that life begins at conception. That's my belief, but I don't live in a bubble. I live in a society where other people get to make the laws as well. I can espouse my beliefs without saying that my beliefs should be the only beliefs, and I think this is where the Republican Party needs to do that.
Anthony, Pop spoke about this as a Catholic politician. You'll remember at Notre Dame in 1984. And he said, look, I'm a Catholic. I live by Catholic teaching, but I'm not putting my religion on other people because God forbid someday they do it to me. And that doesn't seem to be the rule that we're seeing on the right now. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, it's social conservatism, and the great irony is it's fiscal irresponsibility on the right. You know, Trump talks about that and spent $8 trillion in deficit spending while he was president. So the Louisiana case, which we haven't brought up, is also a very big and seismic problem for the Republicans. So, suburban women are likely going to be the linchpin in this election, and I think you're going to see massive ads about them wanting to control their bodies and to control these decisions, whether they're left or right. And believe it or not, quietly, a lot of people have had issues with abortions, whether they're conservative or not. And there's a little bit of a Bradley effect on this in the conservatives, Chris. They'll say they're not for it, but they'll close the curtain and they'll vote with Joe Biden on this.
We'll see. Anthony Scaramucci. I got to jump. I'm sorry, Lindsay. I apologize.
Okay.
I wish you to have a very good weekend, but I can't get sideways with Dusty. It's too scary. Mooch, good luck with the new book. From the White House, what was it? From Wall Street to the White House and back. That's what it is. I'll tell you what it is. I've read the book now, and my son is looking at it because it is a great set of circumstances that you may kind of know about Anthony and the rules that he followed himself and that he knows works for others about how you deal with hard times. It can either take you down or it can be a challenge to a better path up. What are you going to do with it? That's what the book's about. Mike Broomhead, thank you very much. Lindsey Granger, I appreciate you. Anthony, I love you. 4 minutes, 5 seconds. When we come back, Brian Kohberger. The alibi, to me, was very disappointing. He likes to go out at night. Okay, now, the man charged with slaughtering 4 young Idaho college students was back in court today, and they claim they can support his alibi that he was nowhere near the house. How? Court just adjourned. We'll take you there. All right, we all know about the Idaho student murders, right? 4 college kids just brutally murdered. Does the guy who is standing trial for it have an alibi? Brian Kohberger, back in court. Defense brought in a surprise witness that they say could help back up claims he was nowhere near the house at the time that the murders took place. Court just adjourned. NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton was there. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I don't think the witness backed up the claims, Chris, but it was interesting. This is only the second time this has happened where they called in a witness. It was Detective Mowry from the Moscow, Idaho Police Department. The defense really grilling him. The defense is not happy, saying that they haven't gotten evidence, they haven't gotten discovery that they've been looking for. And they got out of the detective. He says that he just came across some cell phone data just yesterday that he didn't know about, that he hadn't properly filed. The defense was very, very upset about that. What we don't know is whether or not that cell phone data is really relevant to the case at all. We do know big picture, the cell phone data, the cell phone pings is important because the prosecution says it's those pings that put Kohberger near the house where the murders happened. The defense says that he was nowhere near the house. You mentioned the alibi. They say that he was out for a joyride, basically, looking at the stars, driving around about 25 miles away. They believe that there's cell phone data that will support that, but none of that came out today, Chris.
Well, what they're probably playing to, Brian, is the fact that very often, depending on the kind of data it is, it's general, it's regional, it's not site-specific. But let me ask you, Brian, how do they deal with the car seen speeding by on the cameras nearby?
Well, they say that there's more video of the car, too, that's going to help back up the alibi. Again, they haven't shown it to us, but that was part of the hearing today. They went after that police detective saying, wait a minute, did you get surveillance video from the Idaho Department of Transportation? Did you send letters? Did you go to special websites? Why did you only get the video that you got? And they were sort of hammering him about that. Again, perhaps they didn't just because it wasn't relevant, but they're obviously trying to show here, trying to poke holes in the police investigation. Not uncommon. Obviously, that seems like what defense attorneys do with the police. But we'll see how it plays out.
It's a little early for them to be doing it, but I got it. Brian Anthony, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's bring in defense attorney Mark Geragos and Florida State Prosecutor Dave Arenberg. Very confusing legal aphorism, Counselor Geragos, that always gave me trouble, but may apply here. Absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Is that what the defense is playing here? That, wait a minute, where's all the stuff that could prove what we're trying to get you to believe? Is that what they're doing right now?
I think that was Don Reagan who, in his cabinet position, who most recently, or maybe it was Rumsfeld, who most recently coined that or reinvigorated that phrase. I think it's more global here. I think the defense, you'll remember just recently, the prosecution has basically been trying to put aside the search warrant affidavit. And there's for good reason, because the search warrant affidavit said some things that today, if you take a look at what was testified to, they're not consistent. You can't make them jibe. And I think the defense is onto something here. I think what they are able to prove is that originally what happened here is the prosecution claimed that they had an absence of things, namely it was not pinging on towers, and it may turn out, based on today's testimony and the evidence that he now says, or the data that the witness now says he just came across, that there was in fact data during the critical time period. If there was, and the data is not pinging off of the cell towers that are in the immediate vicinity, that's a pretty good defense.
Dave, is this a situation where you think they have the wrong guy, or is this a situation where you have cops who are at risk of not making the case against the right guy?
Chris, I think there's a lot of evidence pointing to this particular defendant as the killer, but good defense lawyers like Mark Geragos are trained to try to point out the flaws in every investigation. Really, you can have police do 1,000 things right, and the defense lawyer will say, why didn't you do 1,001? And maybe this hearing was to try to establish that there was a discovery violation, because you remember there's another case in Idaho, Lori Vallow Daybell, where the prosecutor did not turn over the information in a timely fashion, and as a result, the judge took the death penalty off the table. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why you saw this line of inquiry here by the public defender. Maybe she's gaming to try to get the death penalty taken off the table, or maybe to get some of this evidence suppressed.
All right, let me jump to the next story. Gentlemen, I appreciate...
I don't disagree.
Ahead,
I think that's a very... I was going to say, I think Dave has a very good point. I mean, what may seem boring to people who are outside of the arena may be something that, a lot of capital punishment defense is to try to eliminate the death penalty. So that makes sense.
Understood. It's just a little curious that they're doing it this early. Usually you would be doing this, at the trial. But we'll see. We'll see where they take it and how it works out. Mark Garagos, thank you very much.
Remember,
you want to do it early and often. That's what you were going to say.
Exactly right.
You want to do it early and often.
You don't want a death qualified jury if you can help it.
Right. No, I get it. Well, let's see if it works. Dave Arenberg, Mark Garagos, thank you both. As always, please enjoy the weekend. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Up next, the Twitter files are not over. Independent journalist Matt Taibbi and Mike Schellenberger, remember, and Barry Weiss revealed massive amounts of information that showed censorship happens. Censorship happens on social media specifically. I told you it's not reality. Now, Taibbi says just hours ago, new reporting. No, it's even worse than that. How could it be worse? He's here to tell us next.
The intelligence community in general. In 2020, Twitter was the subject of a major cyber intrusion. They were hacked. 130 accounts were broken into, including Barack Obama's, Elon Musk's, and Joe Biden's. And they brought in a security expert. They had so much negative publicity that they had to bring in people from the outside to deal with their issues. Next thing they know, they terminated that person. And what we found in the files is that they fired that person, they believe, because he was informing on them that he had a formal agreement with the intelligence services. The overall arc of the Twitter file stories were about how Twitter went from not wanting to be partners with the government on censoring and content moderation to becoming a full-fledged partner with them by 2020. And the stuff that we found in this particular story is really the middle part that we missed the first time around. It describes that journey from not wanting to basically agreeing to do it for a variety of reasons.
Did you miss it because you're in on it? No, I'm kidding. So what is the CIA aspect of this? How did they get dangled?
So there's a number of CIA angles to this. When they brought in this outside expert, the company that that he hired to do an internal audit of Twitter was a firm that had been launched by seed money from an investor who sits on the board of In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm. So there were CIA connections. The audit was led by a person who actually authored a book called The CIA Analyst's Guide to Spotting Fake News. There were people from other intelligence services involved in the internal audit of Twitter as well. And before you knew it, the entire senior ranks of Twitter were filled with people from a variety of intelligence services, the NSC, the CIA, the Department of Defense, DHS, the FBI. And that was one of the things we couldn't figure out when we arrived at Twitter is, why are all these enforcement and intelligence people in the senior ranks of this company? And it turns out that they were trying to improve their relationships with these agencies.
So it wasn't that it was so much agenda specific. They were just trying to have reach and control. Has anybody reached out to you yet from the government saying they're going to do hearings on this?
No, I mean, not on this issue yet specifically. We have a lot more that we have to put out. We only just put out the bare bones of this particular story. It's a little bit complicated, but there are many moving parts to it. There are all sorts of figures who are known to Americans. Like one of the people involved in this audit was Nina Jankowicz. At least on paper she was. She says she wasn't. She was the head of that disinformation governance board that was so unpopular for a while. But it seems that the overall arc of the story is that not just Twitter, but a number of the platforms, Facebook and Google, they had a kind of standoffish relationship with the government up until maybe 2012 or so. And then there started to be this pressure for them to partner with the government on these issues. And some of them gave in faster than others. Twitter was really the last of the holdouts. And what we have in these documents describes how they internally came to the decision that, yes, we have to partner with the government.
Keep it coming, brother. Transparency is truth. We got to know what was going on if we want to make anything better. Thank you very much. Matt Taibbi, you got to check out Racket News. I'm telling you, he's doing the job. He does it the right way. Thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend. I can't wait for the next 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Now you get to have your say. 844-968-7720. Here's the number. Use it. Vamos a buscarlo. That's Spanish for let's get after it. Dusty, who do you have? Hey, and did you hear Mike Tyson speak in Italian on the Hannity show? His Italian was awesome.
Listen,
Mike Tyson was talking about his upcoming fight, and he was speaking in fluent Italian.
Let me just tell you something, and I know you know a lot about Mike Tyson, but I spent a day with Mike Tyson in a room. We were pitching a show. This was many years ago. That man is unbelievable. His knowledge base is he's got a library in his brain. He's really quite an outstanding guy.
He'll always be a controversial figure. He's got his own take on accusations made against him, but I got to tell you, he has continued to try to expand himself, that's for sure. All right, who do you got?
Okay, let's go to Jeannie in Texas, Austin, Texas.
Oh, look, you finally have a NewsNation shirt on. Good. You wear every other call signal. At least finally you got this one. Good, good. All right, what's your question?
Hi, Chris. I have more of a, comment, but, I voted for Biden, not going to vote for him again. I don't think he's been a good president. Too long to go into. That would take too long. And I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'm politically homeless. I was kind of going toward RFK, but his backtrack on his abortion stance, I don't want to vote for anybody who backtracked on anything. I want them to either stand, so what's a person like me supposed to do?
I'll tell you. I'll raise my hand. I have an answer. Don't vote for president. Vote down ballot. Vote for the congressional seats. Vote for the local seats. People say, well, that's giving away your vote. No, it isn't. The choices suck. The choices suck. Oh, yeah, but you still have to pick. No, that's how we got in this mess, Jeannie, is that we started a culture of accommodation. Oh, yeah, I know it's bad, but you got to pick the less worse. You don't do that anywhere else in your life, okay? I think I'll marry him because the other guy's even more of a jerk. You know what I'm saying? That's not the way you do things. And we shouldn't do it in our politics. Don't vote for president if that's the way you feel. Vote down ballot. Next.
Okay, I was trying to find my Mike Tyson pictures, the two of us, in my phone. I can't find it. Vanessa from Miami. I'm going to find it before the end of this block.
I'm sure you will. Vanessa, what's your question?
Hi, Chris. I love your show. First of all, I'm in Miami. I'm right now in my yacht. I watch you every single night. My question is, do you think that Trump will get the blacks and the Hispanics by going to Bronx?
Don't lump them, first of all, okay? Very different populations. Neither is a monolith, right? Not all blacks live in the hood. Right? You have plenty of different socioeconomic strata. They are disproportionately more affected by poverty, therefore more sensitive to inflation in those populations. But the Hispanics are a very different voting group. Also not monolithic, but more so than black voters. Now, you can say, what are you talking about? The blacks vote Democratic all the time. There's it's complicated. There's a huge concentration in urban areas. And that's why on those municipal side votes, they've built up a Democratic base. But nothing is forever. Do I think Trump's going to get those votes in New York City? Hell no. I don't think he's going to get those votes. But remember, there are a lot of big city minority populations in states that do matter and are in play. And if the needle moves even a little bit, it could matter. Next.
Next, we are going to go to Mr. Positive.
Oh, Mr. Positive. I had another guy who wanted to call in for my radio show. I guess he didn't. Lee from Atlanta didn't call?
No, I have Lee. We're going to have Lee next. Get me Lee.
Oh, good.
Hey, you guys, you there?
Mr. Positive.
Yes.
Yeah, how you doing, bud?
Good, my friend. Hey, thanks for taking my call. I got to ask you, can Supreme Court justices be objective? Can anybody really be objective?
Yes.
You love reading Meditations, where you grew up with the great Cuomo family. Can you think outside the conditions that you were raised in? We're talking about the game, and how do we change if we can only be if we can't be objective?
Objective isn't the standard. Fairness is the standard. All right, you're a human being. You have feelings. That's what you're referring to. You're right, Mr. Positive. Can the justices go beyond their own personal limitations? And of course, that's what we're banking on, right? That's why they're the highest court in the land. That's why you're supposed to have the best there. Now, here's the problem. It's become too politicized. Alito, Thomas, they're just obvious. What RBG did, how she felt about Trump and letting it be known. All right, everybody is getting affected by this fringe mentality and toxicity. So, do we need changes? Yes. What's the problem? You need a constitutional amendment to create a term limit within the Supreme Court. I think you need that. I think we should push them to make their own rule, because they can have their own rules. They should make their own rule about getting out after a certain level of superannuation. 65 is when most people have to retire. For them, they're like just getting started. So maybe they should figure out themselves. The problem is then they enforce it. That's how we got into the problem with watching what they do with their money and speeches and who they hang out with in the vacations. We've been lowering the bar for who gets to sit on that court. And as a result, we're getting people who seem to have less and less attachment to the superiority of it. You know what I mean? They're acting more like, rank and file judges who get elected, as opposed to ones who are supposed to be the best of the best. We need change. What is that going to look like? I don't know. But if they have to enforce it, I don't know how things get better. It's tricky. Next.
We don't have, I think we're out of time. You have a final thought.
What?
Sorry. You have another minute.
How much time in the next block?
A minute. And then if
so
you go
keep
now,
Lee.
you have
I'll talk to him in the next block.
Okay, I'll give you Lee. Quick,
I'll do another call in the next minute.
All right, fine. Lee next.
Take a break. 4 minutes, 45 seconds. We'll be back. Lee from Atlanta. What is your question, sir?
I don't have a question. It was more of a statement there, Mo. How you doing?
How you doing, brother? Lee and I met on my radio show many years ago. We've stayed in touch. Beautiful guy, beautiful family. What all of us are trying to be as voters. He is a true independent, critical thinker. What's on your mind?
So just real quick, I was listening to what you guys were talking about at the beginning of the block, and I think that, you'll definitely have some minorities that vote for Trump because, I guess they believe that the president has a lever that goes economy good, economy bad, but that's not how it works. And I think if you're going to do that, then you might as well just be voting to put yourself in a camp. We've seen everything this guy said he was going to do, how he was going to round up people. Just the plan that he's talking about for rounding up minorities would affect 1 in every 10 Americans.
Yep. You make a strong point, Lee. And